Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. So, now that these all-terrain vehicles are 40 years old, 45 years old, and this discussion also goes for the Honda 200SX, TRX200SX, and several others, the rear end bearings begin to go bad. Especially if one immerses these in a creek, or somebody before you got it 30 years ago kept immersing them in a creek. And quite honestly, changing the rear end bearings, that is really tough. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably somewhere around a 12. I avoid it at all costs. I actually, as the bearings start to go bad, I kind of take it easy on these things. And let me tell you why. This is not complete. The chain guard is not complete. It is missing a cover that bolts on here that actually turns with the axle. And then it's missing a cover that goes on it. To get these off, you got to pull the wheel and the hub, or just pull the hub and the wheel will come off with it. Then you take this off, then you take this cover off. It kind of snaps on, and you can see there's a bolt through there and a bolt all the way in the front. Now, generally speaking, part of the chain guard is always missing, and quite honestly, even for me, I always think, do I just want to hack the chain guard off and be done with it, or do I want to leave it there? Anyway, so after you get this part of the chain guard off, then you take that bolt out and that bolt out, which allows the inner piece of the chain guard to be loose. So, you've just done the easy part, and look how much work you've done. The next thing is there are 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 2 have the adjusters on them, and those 2, they're just pivot bolts. They are used for tightening the chain. And your problem bolts will be this guy, right, which is actually missing on this one, and this guy. And back to that dipping it in water stuff. When you get water in here, the bolts go through and actually stick into the brake drum area. So when you have water in here, the inside gets rusty. So as you go to back them out, right, you got this whole rusty area that has to go through the threaded area, and most of the time they break off, but not in a good way. And let me show you. Here's a rear axle assembly, and this is from a 200M. And what has transpired here, once again, the hub was off, the cap was off, the guy took the chain guard off, right? He unbolted these from the frame. Then he's got these 4 bolts out. Once again, this bolt, and there's an adjuster on the lower one, not too bad. This bolt frequently comes out. Unfortunately, this lower one, which has an adjuster and all, right, this one normally breaks off. And the reason why, and what breaks off is the bolt normally doesn't shear. There's a threaded area, kind of an internal nut that's welded on to the flange. So the threaded nut, once again, is welded to the flange. As you go to spin it off, because it's all rusty, it breaks off. And you see that hole right there? That's where it snaps off. So now you got this thing spinning, and the best wrench to get these loose are, just your nice spoon wrench. So now it's spinning, right? So what do you do? You actually have to go in here with the cutoff and cut it off, right? Zip, it's off. So at this point, the 4 bolts are off, the chain guard's loose. You pop the chain, whether you have to delink it or just rotate it off, so to speak. You know, move it to one end, turn the axle, and have it jump off, right? So you get the brakes out of the way, and you take the whole thing off. Now let's go back to the more complete one. Let's assume you got it this far. You're doing pretty good. You're about halfway through the trouble. What most folks do is, especially if their chain guard is battered, they cut it right through here and maybe a couple of times and just get the chain guard the heck out of there. And you know what, it's, once again, there are so few with chain guards left. The reason why this still has one is because I just really don't want to cut this. But if you don't cut this and you want to remove it, you have to take the whole axle and bearings apart. And in this case, these bearings are still good, so I don't want to get myself into trouble with them. To change the bearings, you have to take these 2 large nuts off the axle. So you got to hold the axle still and remove them. Some people do this, get these loose first. You know, they spray them, and while the axle's still on the bike and the tires are still on and so forth, they put their long wrench on it and jump up and down and, you know, utter blue words and get them off that way. I've had some success with that. Generally speaking, for me, they seem to like to round out. So occasionally I'll cut them with the Dremel tool, get plenty of whatever I happen to be using, PB Blaster or whatever, into them, get them to remove, right, put them aside, and then what I'll do is I'll actually weld them up, grind them and so forth, and put them back on. Don't get the weld where the threads are, right? If you only cut it and then put it back together again, you're losing out of probably, I don't know, 3 inches of thread, right? 1 inch axle times pi, so 3 inches of thread, you're losing, you know, like a hair worth of it, so that won't hurt you. So that's off. You take this and the axle should slide out. Some of these actually have some of the like 110s, 125s. They actually kind of have a pipe in the center to kind of load the bearings, right? So you can't squeeze the bearings in too much. Some of them have that spacer. I guess the proper word would probably be spacer in the center. And if you let the bearings get really bad, the spacer gets hammered and then it won't slide off the axle. And, you know, now you've gotten the axle out of this thing and you have yourself a whole heap of trouble, right? Anyway, so let's assume things go well. You get these off, you take this off, right? And you manage to slide the thing out. Now, this gets to be more of what you're looking at. There's a drum that slides on here. Some of them have a clip, some of them just use the bolts. But anyway, so the drum slides over that. You slide it, this is off, the bolts are off, all this is out. And hopefully your axle slides right off and your bearings are here and there, right? You just put a long rod and you tap that bearing out, use the same long rod, tap this bearing out, and once again carefully put them on. Perhaps a piece of 2x4 cut in a small square and tap them in both sides, all well and good. Some people put a grease fitting here, drill and put a grease fitting here. As you're squirting grease in though, sooner or later you're going to grease your back brakes, so I'm not sure how much that's going to help you. If the bolt breaks off here, right, you can kind of put a bolt through, make sure, you know, with a couple of washers, make sure everything's flat and all, none of this, you know, bolt right in a weird place, but put it through, bolt, a couple of washes to pull it nice and flat, and then you could kind of weld it on the other side. Obviously, while you're in here, you're probably going to service the brakes and everything else. Putting it back together, once the bearings are done right, you slide this in. Well, you deal with the chain guard first. Are you going to put it back on? Are we getting rid of it? You slide the axle in, right? Once again, get rid of a bunch of this other stuff. As you get rid of the chain guard, might as well clean it up, right? You fix the bolt that snapped off, because probably out of 100 times, this bolt will break off 95. More than 9 out of 10 times, just to give you an idea of how probable it is, right? And you take the whole thing apart. If you want to buy an axle, a Honda 200S axle, make sure you look at it closely if you're buying it off of eBay to make sure this bolt isn't broken. If you buy it someplace from like Southern California or Arizona or New Mexico, they have less trouble with the, you know, running them up and down streams all the time. And I've had better luck with them. Not saying that a New York, Massachusetts, or New Jersey one will definitely be bad, but just from a geographic point of view, look at them closely. If this thing is spun off, you should pay less for it. The last one I bought on eBay that was in really nice shape, I think it cost me about $150 to have it delivered. Occasionally somebody will say, oh, I need a new axle, could we cut a deal? The problem with this is nowadays they got to be the major part of $50 to ship. And they are my common point of failure, right? I always need them. So if I send one to you, chances are when I need one, I can't come up with one. And you say, well, just take one off of something. Well, once again, these bolts are always breaking off. So if I go to take it off and it snaps off, now I got two problems. The one I started working with and the one I just created by breaking another bolt off. Anyway, I hope these are helpful. Generally speaking, the bearings are fairly cheap for these. Sprockets aren't too bad. If you're going through this trouble, I recommend you might as well do your brakes while you're in there. You want to do your bearings, obviously. You might as well change your sprockets, front, back, change the chain, do all that stuff. So basically, I'm telling you, if you have a 200S, 200M, 200X is a little different, TRX200SX, any of these with the drum brake and the whole chute match in the back, basically any rear end with the drum brake is going to have a certain version of this trouble. Keep them out of the water, my suggestion. If you feel your bearings are getting weak, take it easy on them. Before your bearings start getting weak, you know, it's really tempted to get on a 200S. And even myself at 200 pounds, if I put all my weight on the front tire and I'm on gravel and grass, if I really lean way over the front, I could get the back spinning, right, and do donuts. I mean, I look kind of ridiculous because looks like I'm completely over the front wheel, but you could get the back tire spinning, and then, you know, you shift your weight backwards to dig in and take off, lift the front wheel the whole bit. Just remember how painful it is to change those back bearings before you get there. Anyway, I hope this video helped some of you folks who do have a bearing change to do. It's a lot of work. You know, it's not one of those things, oh, the bearings came in, you know, I'm going to change them tonight, Friday night, and I'll be out riding tomorrow. I mean, if you're really good and really lucky, maybe. But I'd, as a betting person, I'd almost bet against you, because probably not. once again, it's very hard to find one of these rear axle assemblies in really nice shape. So, questions if you have them. I want to thank you all for watching and commenting and subscribing. Please remember, keep your feet down, your heads up, and I want you to get out and enjoy each and every day. Bye now.